The purpose of our award-winning films and programs is to combat that ignorance and provide biblical truth. God told the prophet Obadiah that in the last days he was going to wipe out the descendants of Edom because they stood by while their brother Jacob, or Israel, was held in captivity and they did nothing. How will God judge the church throughout history because they stood by during the pogroms, during the Inquisition, during the Holocaust, and by and large, the church is standing by again today as we watch the rise of anti-Semitism in our communities around the globe. With the minimum donation of just $20 a month, you can help partner with PJTN to confront this growing threat in your community. Now, I want to encourage you, if you haven't been to our website, please go to pjtn.org/donate and become a PJTN Watchman tonight. Now, in the headlines this week, I want to talk about some of the newsworthy stories that have been going on to highlight the anti-Semitism that we're seeing. In fact, I'm going to start in Europe because we've always seen anti-Semitic incidents in European countries. We never, of course, expected to see those similar incidents happening in the United States, but unfortunately, they are. However, in anti-Semitism in France, there's a report in Allgemeiner has moved from the streets into homes. And this is from the head of French Jewish community. The article states that the Jews in France feel threatened in their own homes. The president of CICREF, which is the French Jewish communal body, said during a discussion of the anti-Semitism that has resulted in several deaths and injuries among French Jews over the past decade. He stated what used to be attacks on buildings or insults thrown in the street has evolved into the most violent acts. In the last 18 months, 2 elderly Jewish widows in Paris, Sarah Halimi in April of 2017 and Marielle Knoll in March of 2018, have been murdered in brutal anti-Semitic assaults, while several incidents of violent raids on Jewish homes involving gangs of mainly Muslim youths have also been reported. Sadly, as Caliphate with the Jewish Agency acknowledged, the problem is not new, though the pattern of Jewish response is changing. The anti-Semitic violence in 2012, there was an incident where there were 13 a year that witnessed the murders of a rabbi and 3 young children during a terrorist attack at a Jewish school in Toulouse. French Aliyah, Aliyah to Israel climbed precipitously with 8,000 Jews immigrating to Israel in 2015 alone. However, they're seeing a new phenomenon. Instead of making Aliyah, the Jewish community, the members of the Jewish community are moving to, they're leaving Paris, Marseille, in Lyon, in Toulouse, and in other cities, and they're moving into neighborhoods that are more Jewish. This is very frightening. I don't know if you have seen the movie Sarah's Key. If you haven't, I want to encourage you. You can probably watch it on Netflix, and you could also probably see it somewhere online or order a copy of it. But it talks about a story of a young girl who was caught in during the Holocaust. She was Jewish, and what happened in France, how French citizens rounded up, and the police rounded up their own Jewish citizens and put them in a coliseum, treating them like complete animals. So France has had a long history of having problems with anti-Semitism. Moving on, the next story, this is in Newsmax reported, why did nearly 40% of Norwegians compare Israelis to Nazis? And ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge problem that the world, the people who are anti-Semitic, accuse Israel of treating Palestinians or Arabs like what we saw in apartheid South Africa, or like what happened with the Nazis, that now the Jews or Israel has become the new Nazis, which is absolutely egregious to even to suggest such a thing. The Jews are not aggressive, evil people like they are portrayed. And for Norwegians to come out and accuse them of this, it's absolutely outrageous. So we see this mindset so pervasive in Europe, as we always have, moving closer to home in the United States. Massachusetts taxpayers sue over anti-Semitic pro-Islam school lessons. And this is, we're gonna watch a video here a little bit later in this program that talks about what's going on in Massachusetts. But a group of Massachusetts-based taxpayers are suing the school committee in the city of Newton, a wealthy liberal enclave, over what they claim is the leadership's ongoing promotion of anti-Semitic school materials. That's what we're going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, because here in Tennessee, back in 2012, we had a parent, a PJTN watchman, whose son came home from school questioning the authenticity of the Bible because he also found an anti-Semitic quote. And that quote happened to legitimize Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. Of course, the community rallied together. There were petitions signed. There were parents who came and attended school board hearings. We testified before the school board members and the superintendent of schools demanding that the textbook be removed. Of course, it was a Pearson published textbook. No surprise there, because Pearson Publishers is based out of Great Britain. They're not even a U.S.-based textbook publishing company, but they own 80% of the textbooks being used right here in the United States. So that should make all of us very uncomfortable. In fact, we wonder why we see a growing rise of anti-Semitism within our K-12 programs and, of course, schools of higher learning, our college campuses. Well, we have Pearson to thank for that. Because of the content, because of the way they communicate the whole Arab-Israeli conflict, accusing the Jews of occupying Palestinian land, where, as Christians, we've read our book, our Bible, we know history. God made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants forever, and that covenant is still intact. That land belongs to Israel, none other. The article does go on to say that a lawsuit stems from a controversy of a Newton Public Schools' use of what the group claims are unvetted educational materials produced by the Saudi Arabian oil company Aramco and the Qatari government, which has long been cited for its funding of terrorism. And, you know, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is shocking to a lot of parents when I travel across the country. I just got back from Texas. I've been throughout Florida, of course, Tennessee, Ohio, and even in Newton, Massachusetts earlier this year. And when I tell parents and citizens that the majority of textbooks being used in schools in the United States were published by a textbook publishing company that is British-based, whose shareholders include Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Libya, and Turkey, that should make all of us uncomfortable. These countries are not going to teach an accurate perspective or write an accurate perspective in a publishing textbook about America, our founding, our greatness, the responsibility of America. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at your children, if you have children in school right now, or grandchildren in school, see if they can bring their history, geography, or social studies textbooks home. That right there will show you they don't let those books come home. They don't want parents and grandparents or tax-paying citizens to see how the children are being educated and what they're being taught. Why? Because then it exposes their agenda, and they don't want that to happen. They want to continue to indoctrinate our children. So now we don't even teach our children, and you may find this shocking because I found when I speak to parents, they say, no, that can't be true. But we don't teach our children about the Pilgrims and the Mayflower anymore, and how they came over here, how they left England because they wanted to worship God as they, according to the Bible, not according to the King James version of the Bible. They wanted to worship God in spirit and in truth. We don't teach about the American Revolution. We start at the Civil War period, at Reconstruction, and then we move forward. If you can't teach your children the foundation of your country, why your nation was established, what were the sacrifices that were made, who was willing to make them, and why it is worth fighting for this country. This is the greatest country in the world. And unfortunately, our children are not being taught about America's greatness anymore. So it's very important that we stay on top of this issue, and that's why we dedicated this program. In fact, we will continue to talk about this issue in the coming weeks because, again, our children are in school. You're going to hear more stories of more parents rising up, filing lawsuits. Also, in the news this week, there was we all know that Aretha Franklin passed away, and there was a funeral and memorial service at Greater Grace Temple in Detroit, Michigan, which was where she happened to be a member of. And Bishop Ellis, who is the lead pastoral leader, he invited Louis Farrakhan to attend the services. And not only did he invite the anti-Semite, Louis Farrakhan, who is not a Christian, he is Nation of Islam, he is a Muslim. I have no problem with Muslims coming to Christian funerals, but he never should have been given a prominent role on the stage so that all the cameras could see him sitting there with the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton, and other distinguished leaders. This is outrageous that he would allow this man this prominent role. Ironically, in their mission statement as a congregation, as a church, they say that they believe in the Old and New Testament scriptures, all of it. Unfortunately, they are willing to invite somebody who is as anti-Semitic as Louis Farrakhan is to attend this service and then prominently display him on the stage as speaker after speaker after speaker went up to the podium and spoke about their relationship with Sister Franklin. Of course, we put out a press release condemning it, calling on the pastor, the bishop, to apologize for the invitation for displaying Louis Farrakhan, the anti-Semite, so prominently. And it's unfortunate because, you know, during the 60s civil rights movement, when the black community was in their hour of greatest need, it wasn't the white Catholic or white Protestant church who showed up to march with the black community in Selma, Alabama. No. Who was it? It was the Jewish community. It was rabbis. There were 2 Jewish boys who were killed in Mississippi because they decided they were going to defy the hatred and the racism that was so pervasive in this country back then. Yes, it's not a very good time, and it's not a great historical time in our country, but the Jews were there for the blacks in their hour of greatest need. Now, anti-Semitism is on the rise, and the Jews are in their hour of greatest need. And where is the black community? Martin Luther King Jr. would be standing if he were alive today. He would be condemning the anti-Semitism. He spoke about it often. He even said that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That's Martin Luther King Jr. And most blacks do not know that truth, that bit of history. He spoke against anti-Semitism. He understood the plight of the Jews. And we should have more members of the black community standing up with them in their hour of greatest need. And certainly not inviting people like anti-Semites like Louis Farrakhan to attend and give a prominent role. If the pastor or the bishop would have allowed him to sit on the front row, fine. He obviously had a friendship with Aretha Franklin, but to give him such a prominent role for the whole world to see, it was outrageous. And finally, the last story I want to talk about is the UK Labour Party accepts full definition of anti-Semitism. A couple weeks ago, we talked about this, that Jeremy Corbyn, who is a member of the Parliament and could possibly be running for Prime Minister in London, refused to adopt a definition, refused to support a vote to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism in the UK. Well, the UK Labour Party did accept the full definition of anti-Semitism. So we're encouraged by that. But anyhow, and the other thing I just want to mention, we just launched with a press release yesterday for those of you who are on our mailing list. Again, If you're not on the PJTN mailing list, I want to encourage you, go to pjtn.org, sign up to get our newsletters, our press releases, our media alerts, so that you can stay informed about what's going on, so that you can get involved in confronting anti-Semitism in your community. Education is key. You need to know what's going on in your community, and this is the place. PJTN is the place to find out. But we launched a statewide media campaign yesterday in the state of Florida to expose the content in the textbooks in that state. We are working with citizens in almost 25 counties, and these are parents and taxpaying citizens who are fed up with the indoctrination of our children. So Florida has been a key state, and Florida is a key state because it is a battleground state. And politically, Florida is also the third largest purchaser of textbooks in the country. So if we can get Florida to start cleaning up their textbooks, get rid of the Pearson published textbooks, and start teaching an accurate perspective of history, then other states will follow suit and they will purchase Florida textbooks as well. Typically how it goes is if the largest purchaser of textbooks, if another state will purchase what one state who might be the largest, like Florida, like Texas, like California, they can get those textbooks inexpensively as well. So moving on, we're going to talk about again how school is finally back in session, and of course we're also seeing the frightening realities of the broadening epidemic we face in America of revisionist history, as I spoke about earlier, that is being presented to our children in their textbooks. Because again, Pearson Publishers is a globalist textbook publishing company. They publish textbooks around the world. They have a multicultural perspective, and their goal is to put all the children around the world on the same page. Nobody is better. The United States isn't better than any other country. And it's all the wording, it's all the way they phrase, the phraseology, the content that they put in the textbooks. And of course, many of you are familiar with Common Core. The reason why we have these textbooks is because Pearson, who is behind Common Core, and unfortunately so is Jeb Bush, as we're in Florida. Jeb Bush came to Tennessee when the citizens were fighting and trying to encourage their state legislature to remove Common Core from our schools. And Jeb Bush comes up to Tennessee and tells our state legislature that they better keep Common Core in place. Well, now we're coming to Florida to push back at Jeb Bush and tell him, you know something, we're going to help the Florida citizens to get rid of Common Core too. It is critical for us to realize that we are jeopardizing our constitutional republic by allowing the unconstitutional pro-Islamic agenda to be taught in our K-12 schools. Last week I was in Texas meeting with a group of concerned parents and citizens who are equally troubled by the content in their children's textbooks. Through the now decades-old influence of Pearson published textbooks and the Institute of Religious and Civic Values, American textbooks and instructional materials are feeding our children a distorted view of the history of our country and our Judeo-Christian values. PJTN is on the front lines in this textbook battle. We are exposing the agenda and educating parents, citizens about the content that is being provided to our children through their educational materials in their local school districts. If you are not familiar with our PJTN nationwide campaign, I want to encourage you, again, go to the website, look at our issues. There is a link to our textbook battle. You can get more information there to find out what is being taught, some of the content being taught. You will find similar content in your children's textbooks, I can assure you, because these textbooks, again, are being used across the country. So visit our website at pjtn.org and get involved in your community. It is so important that we teach our children about the close bond between America and Israel and the importance of why that bond remains strong. In Genesis 12:3, God told Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you." Now remember, this is the up on the screen you see the Hebraic translation. When God told Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you, and he who ignores you, I will utterly destroy." This is so important, ladies and gentlemen. Israel is called to be a blessing to all nations, but if you read the textbooks and you look at the instructional materials that are being presented to our children, that again, they're memorizing, they're being tested on, they have to pass, and the teachers are teaching this to the children. It is getting ingrained in them, so they come out of school thinking, well, there is a problem with the Jews, or there is a problem with the state of Israel. We must protect the future of our children and pass to them the Judeo-Christian values on which our country was founded. We should not be ashamed of those values because those values have made America who she is. Your continued partnership and financial support will go a long way to make our biblical mandate possible. So it is because of your prayers and financial support that enables PJTN to make the difference. We will not keep silent. And we are on the front lines at PJTN, but it does come with a cost. I am personally inviting you to join me on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. Again, your financial support is to combat the enemies of our values who are massively funded and determined to defeat us. It is not easy, ladies and gentlemen, going up against a conglomerate like Pearson Publishers, who is an over $8 billion company. And they have infiltrated almost every corner of this country and around the world. And so it is our voice that is going to stop Pearson. How do you compete with such a wealthy company when you're a small nonprofit organization? Well, we compete because of people like you, people who tune in, people who want to get involved and be on the front lines to stand with us and to stand against this hatred and this indoctrination in our children's textbooks in our schools. So we're going to watch a short video about another way that you can support PJTN. Take a look. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews. This month marks the 70th anniversary of the historic Declaration of the State of Israel. God's sovereign hand can be seen all over this land. Included in the celebrations is the opening of the American Embassy right here in Jerusalem. In honor of this celebration, PJTN is offering a special 70th anniversary package, which includes a captivating new book and an award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel.
The problem of hostility and bias toward Israel and its supporters on college campuses is becoming well known. What is less well known is that similar hateful materials are now being promoted in American high schools and even middle schools. This is Newton South High School, located in the town of Newton, Massachusetts, an affluent suburb west of Boston. Newton schools claim to celebrate the dignity of all people, but there is a notable exception.
My daughter brought to my attention this article from the Arab World Notebook that she was given as part of a history test, history class on women in the Arab world. And on one page is a paragraph that says that Israeli soldiers are, Israeli occupation forces are imprisoning, torturing, and killing Arab women by the hundreds. And my daughter came to me and said, "Daddy, is this true?" She was very concerned. I said that I'm going to give the school a call and get this straightened out.
World history teacher Jessica Engel rejected Tony's concerns.
She was adamant that the material was appropriate, had been fully vetted, and that the curriculum was going to stand as it was.
Tony received the same response from Jennifer Morrill, the head of the history department at Newton South. The Arab World Studies Notebook has been rejected by many school boards and condemned by the American Jewish Committee as both political propaganda against Israel and religious proselytization for Islam. The notebook was published jointly by the Middle East Policy Council and AWAR, both funded by Saudi Arabia, whose anti-Western, anti-democratic, anti-gay, anti-Semitic, anti-women, and anti-Christian publications are spreading throughout America.
I also had a meeting with Joel Stembridge, who's the principal of South, which was quite honestly a waste of time. I mean, nothing came out of it. At times it was insulting and patronizing, and I actually came away very discouraged from that meeting. Joel Stembridge said to me, "You know what, Tony?" And he looked right at me. He said, "Next year we're going to be studying some things that are going to be even more upsetting to you vis-a-vis the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What are you going to do then?" He said. It was almost like a threat. So, you know, I was pretty upset. I said to my wife and I said to my daughter, "I'm going to do something about this, bring this to the attention of the school, and this has to be removed from the curriculum. There's no way that this can stand."
The Arab World Studies Notebook should never have been used by Newton due to its bias, bigotry, inaccuracies, and glorification of Islam. The notebook, which contains supplementary teaching resources on Islam, was purchased by the Newton Public Schools in the mid-1990s and includes a poem about Jews. "The usurper's flesh will be my food. Beware, beware of my hunger and my anger." And a ludicrous claim. Muslims sailed across the Atlantic and discovered the New World in the year 889. Newton School Superintendent David Fleischman defended the inclusion of the notebook in the 9th grade history curriculum as part of an effort to encourage critical thinking. Tony's experience at the high school mobilized Jewish parents and community members to find out just what is being taught in the Newton schools. One of the textbooks used by Newton teachers is The Modern Middle East, written by James Gelvin, an anti-Israel ideologue and a supporter of the academic boycott against Israel. In his textbook, Gelvin compares Zionism to European colonialism and writes, "The Arab-Israeli conflict is, simply put, a dispute over real estate." This contention ignores the true nature of the 100-year-old conflict, which is in great part religious.
Radical Muslim anti-Zionism is a matter of revenge for honor lost. The existence of Israel, a dhimmi people, a dhimmi people who have established independence in the heart of Dar al-Islam is a terrible blow to Muslim honor, and it's a kind of blasphemy. So destroying Israel is an act of revenge that will restore honor.
The religious nature of the conflict is typically ignored or denied by those who want to portray Israel as irrationally unwilling to make land concessions. Gelvin wrote his textbook while receiving payments from Sheikh Zayed, the anti-Semitic billionaire president of the United Arab Emirates and founder of the Zayed Center, which, according to the ADL, promoted anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. When parents complained, they were told that the textbook had been vetted and that the head of the school's history department, Jennifer Morrill, got it at a workshop for teachers conducted by Harvard's Center for Middle East Studies, and therefore it would be kept in the classroom. The Harvard Middle East Center has received funds from the Saudi government and Aramco, the Saudi oil company. The then director of the Harvard Center was Baber Johansson, an active supporter of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction, or BDS movement against Israel. And the then director of the center's outreach program was Paul Baran, a BDS leader in Somerville, Massachusetts. Baran is married to Palestinian activist Hilary Rantisi, director of the Middle East Initiative at Harvard University, who promotes the dissolution of the Jewish state. Harvard has also received a $20 million donation from Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal to establish an Islamic center. A significant portion of the faculty at the Talal Islamic Center at Harvard also teach at the Harvard Center for Middle East Studies and are active in promoting an anti-Israel agenda at the school. In teaching students about the Arab-Israel conflict, Newton Public Schools use a series of 4 maps created by the Palestine Liberation Organization Public Relations Unit. These maps are also used by Harvard's Paul Baran in his public school teacher training seminars. Newton students were not told that these are PLO propaganda maps. These maps falsely depict Israel as progressively stealing Palestinian land. Underneath the original maps, in fine print, there was even a disclaimer admitting that the maps are for illustrative purposes only. Boundary representations are not authoritative. At some point between the maps' publication by the PLO and their landing on the desks of Newton students, this disclaimer that the maps were not literally true was removed, and they are now being taught as actual fact. The maps lie about the history of the conflict. The pre-1948 map shows part of the British Mandate, not a Palestinian country. The West Bank and Gaza were not part of a Palestinian country, but were occupied by Jordan and Egypt. The final maps show the first ever Palestinian-ruled area created by Israel. Newton School officials claimed that these biased Palestinian maps were balanced by maps with pro-Israel points of view. However, no such maps were found. Newton schools are not unique in promoting Palestinian propaganda and lies. An MSNBC Middle East reporter used the same maps in a news report.
Last Thursday, in an attempt to talk about the context for the current turmoil in the Middle East, we showed a series of maps of the changing geography in that region. We realized after we went off the air, the maps were not factually accurate, and we regret using them.
MSNBC and the reporter subsequently apologized and corrected the record. Newton schools have not. In the classroom, instead of using the authentic Hamas Charter as a basis for discussion, Newton schools presented students with a falsified version, deceptively edited, but which the school claimed as a primary source document. In the Newton version of the Hamas Charter, all instances of the word Jews have been replaced with the word Zionists. All signs of Jew hatred that appear in the original Hamas Charter are omitted in the Newton version. By ignoring the genocidal intent of Hamas and the significant role of religion in the conflict, Newton students are encouraged to believe that the conflict is simply a border dispute, a fight over land, not religion, and therefore can be easily resolved. This is consistent with Professor Gelvin's and Harvard's false framing of the conflict primarily as simply a land dispute of competing nationalisms. In another lesson, students were to consider whether or not there should actually be a Jewish state. To educate themselves on the issue, students were provided with quotes from experts whose opinions were presumably meant to represent all sides. But the package of quotes described as prominent voices on the one-state solution and two-state solution was crudely manipulated. The Newton curriculum prominent voices include 5 radical anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activists, as well as 3 left-wing Israeli leaders, and a New York Times journalist critical of Israel. There are no centrist or right-wing pro-Israel experts presented. This insidious and dishonest approach deliberately skews the center of the discussion toward the radical anti-Israel views of the conflict. The prominent pro-Palestinian voices include Ali Abu Nima, a Palestinian-American propagandist who supports terrorism, opposes the existence of a Jewish state, and has engaged in promoting anti-Semitic tropes. He is the publisher of The Electronic Intifada, a pro-Hamas website that demonizes Israel and describes Palestinian leaders who talk with Israel as collaborators. Edward Said was a Columbia University professor of English and comparative literature, a Palestinian-American who promoted the idea that Westerners cannot judge or criticize non-Westerners. Said was active in promoting the notion that Israel is a colonial state and needs to be eliminated. Tony Jute, professor in European Studies at New York University, promoted the dissolution of Israel as a Jewish state. Virginia Tilley, professor of political science at Southern Illinois University, is a staunch supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel movement, and an advocate for eliminating Israel as a Jewish state and replacing it with a binational state, presumably one in which Arabs and Jews would peacefully coexist. Sadly, there are no Arab societies which provide women or religious minorities equal rights. Today, non-Muslim minorities in the Arab world are being mostly ethnically cleansed or destroyed. And most astounding is the inclusion of John Spritzler, a self-described 60s radical still at it. He is a retired research scientist and former leader, along with Paul Baran, in the Somerville divestment project. Spritzler is the editor of a website that rants about the world revolution, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and the influence of Jewish money in American politics. Spritzler's website includes articles that claim, for example, that Israel engineered the 1976 hijacking of the Air France plane that ultimately resulted in the famous rescue in Entebbe, Uganda. Another article claims that the 1985 murder of Leon Klinghoffer on the cruise ship Achille Lauro by Palestinian terrorists was actually an Israeli black propaganda operation. Prominent voices on the two-state solution include Shimon Peres, former president of Israel and former leader of the left-wing Labor Party; Naomi Chazan, member of several left-wing parties in Israel; Ehud Olmert, former prime minister; and Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist and a harsh critic of Israel. Newton students are not presented with any experts who are representative of mainstream Israeli opinion today. They are not presented with hateful and venomous sermons and public pronouncements by Palestinian officials. Moreover, a book used at Newton schools has a recommended reading list that includes the extremist writings of both Said Qutb, a leading jihadi writer for the Muslim Brotherhood, and Yusuf Qaradawi, a Muslim Brotherhood preacher whose sermons call for the murder of Jews and gays.
تأديب كان تأديب هتلر ما فعل بهم وإن كانوا بالغوا في الأمر ما بلغوا ولكن استطاع أن يوقفهم عند حدودهم وكان هذا أدبا.
But students are not shown the hateful views these men propagate against people they call infidels. These are some examples of materials being taught in Newton School's curriculum for 9th and 10th graders, all in the name of global understanding and critical thinking skills. Biased education about the Middle East in Newton schools is actively promoted by a web of non-profit organizations and social activists who are targeting public schools for political propaganda. They provide teaching materials and speakers, which in many instances bypass public scrutiny. Significant funding for this content comes from Arab countries. Concerned taxpayers have met with teachers and officials asking to see curricular materials on the Middle East, Jews, and Israel, but have been stonewalled. School Superintendent David Fleischman demanded Newton residents pay $4,000 to see what their children are learning. And School Committee Chair Matt Hills sent an email to his staff showing them how to block citizens from obtaining the offending materials. Given the FOIA request, we have asked David Fleischman to avoid compiling and distributing curriculum for this or any course included in the request. Unlike other Massachusetts schools, Newton school officials refuse to make their school curriculum and teaching materials available online.
Let's see all the published materials on the internet, or bring them to the public's eyes, so that concerned people like me don't have to file FOIA requests. I mean, this is absurd.
School Superintendent David Fleischman defended inclusion of the notebook as part of the district's efforts to encourage critical thinking. He told parents the notebook was used as a primary source supplemental material in teaching different perspectives. Chairwoman Claire Sokoloff rejected the characterization of the material as poisonous. She said, "It just contains opinions you don't agree with." Is blood libel against Jews a matter of opinion? After months of parental and citizen protest, the school committee finally agreed to remove the Arab World Studies notebook.
You mean to put this to rest by saying, telling us that the Arab World Studies notebook has been removed from the schools, not because it's Saudi-produced hate literature, but because, and I quote you, there's a general sense the materials were outdated. It's hard to believe that you removed it because it was old.
Documents obtained from the Newton schools under the Massachusetts Public Records Law have revealed that the Arab World Studies notebook was still in use in at least 3 separate classes during the 2013 academic year. Newton school teacher Faye X. Castle, who spent 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco, included the notebook in her 9th grade Ancient World History class curriculum. Newton school officials claimed that the reintroduction of the notebook resulted from an oversight and was eventually corrected. This cannot be verified given the school's denial of access to the curriculum. American school children are being taught a distorted, biased, and false understanding of the Middle East conflict and the Jewish state. Sadly, they are being groomed for Jew hatred and a more intense anti-Israel hostility on college campuses. Newton schools are failing to provide scholarly education. Demand an end to biased teaching, public access to school curriculum, an investigation into how anti-Israeli propaganda is being inserted into the classroom, sensitivity training about the right of Jewish self-determination. Newton deserves better. Call or write. Newton Mayor Seti D. Warren. School Committee Chair Matt Hills. Newton School Superintendent David Fleischman. Newton South High School Principal Joel Stembridge. Newton North High School Principal Mark Aronson.
never ends only if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. If there's one thing history has taught the Jewish people, a place they can go in time of need is essential, and Israel fulfills that role. But the need for a Jewish state is not limited to being only a refuge for Jews. Jewish tradition in Israel grants full rights for women and people of all races, faiths, and gender. This tradition is what often makes Israel among the first countries to send doctors and field hospitals to any place where a natural disaster occurs, utilizing their medical advances to save lives worldwide. Muslims, Christians, and people of every faith, or those of no faith, have the freedom to worship or not worship as they choose. For Muslims, the Jewish state goes out of its way to provide this freedom. For example, every Israeli university gives students the option of deferring their exams during the month of Ramadan. The Knesset calls off all sessions at sunset during Ramadan to ensure that Muslim Knesset members can break their fasts with the traditional iftar dinner. In an open and democratic manner, opportunities for education, advancement, and careers exist for all citizens in the Jewish state. Sadly, such rights and opportunities do not exist in any of the Muslim Arab states. For example, in neighboring Jordan, Jews cannot become citizens. And in Saudi Arabia, no non-Muslim can become a citizen. Saying that Israel must cease to exist as a Jewish state while accepting that other countries define themselves as Muslim is pure hypocrisy. In most of these countries, no rights exist for non-Muslims, women, and the LGBT community. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again for tuning in tonight. I hope you've learned something and you found this program informative. Once this program posts on Facebook, on our Facebook page, I hope that you will share it with your family and friends. This is an important video. And even though this was focused on Newton, Massachusetts, ladies and gentlemen, this is anywhere USA. The same content is being fed to our children throughout our school districts across this country. And the only way it is going to stop is if we, as parents and citizens, rise up in our community. We are here to help you. If you find content, anti-Semitic content, or propaganda in your children's textbooks or your grandchildren's textbooks, we want to hear from you. You can email me at comments@pjtn.org. I want to close this program by just reminding you, please, if you haven't considered becoming a watchman, your involvement and your financial support makes what we do possible. I want to encourage you to go to the website, pjtn.org. Sign up to become a watchman, donate, get on our mailing list, get the information, use the website. There's great information about how you can be educated and informed about what's happening in communities like this, like Newton, Massachusetts. Also, you can follow us on, of course, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're there as well, too. And we need for you to help tell your friends and family. We've got to share this message with everybody that we know, because we are losing our country as a result of this propaganda. And finally, I want to just remind you, our award-winning Focus on Israel shows and documentary films can be seen each week on Daystar TV. You can tune in Saturday nights at 5:30 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and then of course Sunday night at midnight Eastern Time and 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Also on God TV, you can tune in on Wednesdays at 2:30 in the afternoon. So please make every effort to tune in and watch these programs, become informed, and join us. Partner with PJTN. We need you. The only way we're going to take our nation back is if we do it one community at a time, and that requires your support. So I want to thank you for coming, for joining us. Next week we're going to interview a young man from a high school in Texas who is running for school board. He is a senior in his high school. He's going to be running for school board, and we're going to talk to him next week to find out why he's getting involved in this battle. So God bless you. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I look forward to seeing you next week right here at PJTN Online every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Good night.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.
To support